Okay, so we have fallen behind a little bit. I'm much better. Thank you, Lensman. So am I correct that you had 2 lectures to watch by yourselves? Correct? Okay, how many of you watched the first lecture where I introduced Kierkegaard? Be honest, I just need to know. What, 1 person? Sing? 2, 3, 4? Okay. 5, all right, not bad. How many of you watched the second lecture of Kierkegaard? Okay, good. All right, so we're pretty much up to date. Awesome. So what I'm gonna do is review briefly the first lecture, and then we'll get into today's topic, and then we'll be done with Kierkegaard. Is there a test? No. There's no test coming up, is there? Somebody? No, we still have Buber to do after Kierkegaard, right? Okay, so we're good. Okay, nothing to fear. All right, so just to remind us a little bit, right? Kierkegaard compares the lover to a tree, right? We talked about this last time, that in a way, as a tree, right, the highest fulfillment of the tree comes when the tree does what? Let's see if you remember. Ask you a few questions. What is the highest level of treeness? What's the highest level of fulfillment of the tree? When is the tree at its highest level of maturity? Yes, very good, Lensman, right? That's when you give the fruit, right? So the idea here in Kierkegaard is that you are the highest level of your own being when you are not receiving necessarily, right? This is also part of being a tree. You receive the sunlight and the water and so forth, but the highest level of your humanity, right, comes when you're capable of giving love, right? Not just receiving love. And so the sign, right, of an immature lover, right, and we all go through this at times, is when you're thinking, well, I'm not receiving. I'm not getting anything out of this, right? When we're not thinking about what we can give at the moment, just thinking about what we are not receiving. This is the sign for Kierkegaard that we're still in the level of the leaves, right? Still thinking of receiving rather than giving. So this is actually really great advice next time you go through a crisis, right? Next time you catch yourself thinking, I'm not getting anything out of this, right? This relationship is, what are some of the expressions? This is not doing it for me, right? This is not fulfilling me. I don't feel happy, right? Kierkegaard would say, well, there's a next level maybe you can enter at this moment, which is the level of thinking of giving rather than receiving. So we talked about this, right? But then of course we realized that giving without ever receiving is going to lead to depletion, right? And a lot of us are sometimes, or maybe now, or have been at the state where I have given and given and given, and I don't receive from my beloved, and now I am depleted, right? And so Kierkegaard is pointing us to another place where we can receive. Anybody remember where that place is? When we are in a drought, when the beloved is not giving us what we need, where can we go, according to Kierkegaard? See if any of you remember. Yes, very good, Evans and Lensman, right? Within us, he says, there is a hidden source of love, right? All of us have this source within us. We don't need to rely on the external world to be nourished. We have what it takes within ourselves, right? And so the key, right, the $1 million question that I left you with last time after we were at the end of the lecture was, okay, great, we have this source, we have what Kierkegaard calls this hidden lake of love from which we can draw, but how do we connect to this source, right? Most of us, when you're in your difficult situation, you don't feel it. I don't feel anything within me. I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I want to break up with you, I'm sick of your face, right? And so the key question is, how can we connect to this source within, right? Which Kierkegaard says is the very source of love, right? So today we're going to see how to do that. Anybody know what is the attitude? So for Kierkegaard, the way to connect is a certain attitude. Anybody guessed from the reading what is the attitude that we need to adopt in order to begin connecting to the source? Anybody saw that in the reading today? Have a wild guess. What was the reading about today? What was the title? Where is everybody?
It talks a lot about hope.
Okay, very good.
Okay, very good.
Okay, excellent. Absolutely. So this is what we're going to learn today, right? According to Kierkegaard, strangely enough, right? This is not about connecting to the source through prayer or through meditation, although you can, right? But he's wanting to reach, remember, a secular audience. And for him, there is an attitude, there is a certain thing we can do in order to begin connecting to that source. And that thing is called hope, right? So we're going to see how it works. But according to Kierkegaard, the way to connect to this deep, nourishing source is through a certain attitude, a certain approach, a certain stance that we take called hope. Okay, so of course we're all excited. Well, and some of us might be thinking, well, what if I feel hopeless, right? How do I change this? What if I feel completely despairing? I don't feel any hope. Kierkegaard is going to clarify something very important. Make sure you write it down, that hope is not a feeling. Hope is a work of love. Let me write this down, right? It's not just a feeling. It's a work of love. It's something that you do. Okay, so there's hope in that, right? Because if it's just a feeling, we're left to our despair and we're like, I don't know how to manufacture this feeling. I don't want to feel fake, right? And act like everything's good. No, says Kierkegaard, it's not a feeling. It's something that you do. And as you do it, he says, you are connecting, you are creating a connection with this deeper part of yourself. So here's what we of course we need to figure out what is hope and how does it connect us. So two things we're going to talk about today. Number one, hope as a work of love. Number two, hope as a transformative force. Okay, so these are and then finally, yes, one more thing. This famous expression, love is never put to shame. We're going to see why that is true. Okay, ready? All right, let's get into the first point. Hope as a work of love. So Kierkegaard gives us a definition of hope. So if you go with me to page 237, you're going to have that definition right here. This is the second paragraph. Who is with me? Put your hand in the screen. Okay. All right. So he says clearly, this is what it means to hope all things. But in love, to hope all things signifies the lover's relationship to other men. Okay, so first thing we see here is that hope is a relational work. It's a work which is loving. It's a way to relate. Okay, so let's continue. That in relationship with them, hoping for them, we're going to come back to this, he continually keeps possibility open with infinite partiality for his possibility of the good. Okay, so we have to translate this sentence, right? So first of all, first thing we learn is that hope is hoping for them. Let me write this down. What is it? So what does it mean that you're hoping for someone? Who do we usually hope for? When you're in a disastrous relationship, what is usually your hope? Usually, how would you summarize one of your hopes when you are in a disastrous relationship? Give me an idea. Yes, go guys, very good. I wish the yes, sorry, go ahead. Who was talking?
Oh, that was David. I said hope that it gets better.
Yes, very good, right? So you're hoping, I hope it gets better. For who? Who are you longing that it will get better for? Who are you thinking about?
You and your significant other.
Yeah, you are, and your little brother now, Grady, very good. You're also thinking of the other, right? But in general, right, we're thinking, man, I wish things would get better so I could relax around here, so I could feel love, so I could get something out of this, right? So most of the time, when we are hoping, quote unquote, which is not true hope for Kierkegaard, we're wishing, I wish that person would change. I wish they would be better. I wish they would change that terrible habit. I wish they would be more loving. I wish we could, be better so I could be happier. Usually we're thinking of ourselves, but he's saying true hope is not about us. It's about the other. You hope for them. So can anyone tell me, what does it mean? What does it look like to hope for someone? What would it look like? Maybe Grady, you can illuminate us because you're already on the right track.
I'm sorry, first, can you please repeat what you just said?
Yes, what does it mean to hope for someone rather than to just hope for yourself? What does it look like
Um,
to hope for someone?
to hope for someone means you're, for one, you're completely not thinking about yourself, like your own personal and well-being or feelings are not affecting um what you want for the other person, and it's wanting the best and most possible close to perfect outcome for whatever person that you're hoping for. Hoping that well, depending on the situation, just hoping that everything, I guess, works out for the better, for the better,
Excellent,
and yeah,
right?
wishing the best.
Okay, absolutely. When you're hoping for them, you're hoping not that they will change so you can feel happier, but that they will change so they will feel happier, right? You're hoping that they will achieve their best self. You're hoping that the relationship will reach its highest potential. So it becomes then a work of love and not just selfish wishful thinking, right? So in other words, let's give an example that your significant other is kind of cold, indifferent, they're not able to express love like you want them to. This is best case scenario, right? And so you're not going to be hoping, man, I wish they would be more loving. You're going to be hoping, what I wish they would come to terms with what is going on in them. How can they find, right, their way out of this coldness and this detachment? How can they grow as a person, so that our relationship can be better, so that I can better love them, right? The hope is entirely turned to the other, right? So this is the first very important thing, right, that we see. Now he explains, he goes a little deeper. He says, in relationship, hoping for them, now read with me, he continually keeps possibility open with infinite partiality for his possibility of the good. Okay, so what does it mean to be partial? Does anybody know what it means to be partial to someone? You have a bunch of friends, but you're partial to one of them. Anybody know what that means? Let's translate what he's saying here. What does it mean? Yes, Grady, go ahead.
To be partial to a certain person is to be in a group of people, but there's one particular person that piques your interest more than others. That you have um, and a bet like this is like a better feeling than everyone else. Not that you don't love everyone the same, but this particular person just brings something else out of you that other people really can't.
Okay, very good, right? To be partial to someone is to kind of lean towards them, to give them more benefit, right, than the others. So here he's saying, when you hope for someone, you are partial to their possibility of the good. What does that mean, to be partial to the good in someone? Anybody can answer what's going, we can translate what's happening. He keeps the possibility open. He's partial to the good in the other person. What does that mean?
Can I go?
Can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Would it be like that you're like kind of like attracted to their good side, to like their good qualities?
Almost, because remember, you're in a bad spot with that person, right? So but if you're partial to their good qualities, you're almost there. It's not just attracted, you're doing something else. Grady, you want to help?
It means partial to the good to the good is like you're thinking more of instead of any personal feelings you may have towards them, or their looks, or um just anything that goes against what's the best for them, and what's gonna benefit them. Your sole focus is on what's gonna make that person better, not just for you, but for the person after you that they meet, and so on and so forth.
You got it. Absolutely. In other words, your focus, and I'm going to nuance a little bit what Grady said, but the idea of being partial for the possibility of the good means that you are focused on how good they could become. That's what it means. Okay, let me say it again. Let me write it down in the chat, right? To be partial for the possibility of the good. Okay, I'm trying to write this, of the good, means you are focusing on the good they could become, right? You're focusing on the good. And this is kind of what Medina was saying, right? You're focusing on the good that you still see within them. You're focusing on everything they could be. You're focusing on how much better everything could be. This is what it means to hope for someone. It's a way of seeing, right? I'll be right with you, Hassan, right? It's a way of seeing. Do you remember Rumi? Rumi said something like this when he talks in his poetry about the ocean. Anybody remember that poem by Rumi that we studied with the ocean in the water jar? What did I say about that poem? About this particular image? That the beloved is like an ocean within a water jar. What does that mean? How can we interpret this in light of Kierkegaard? Hassan, you want to try? and then ask your question? Okay, Flores, very good, right? You're seeing endless possibilities. People are seeing the water jar, you're seeing the ocean. Okay, let me say that again. To hope is this. People are seeing the water jar, but you are seeing the ocean, the endless possibilities, everything they could be, everything they could become. That is what it means to hope for someone. Okay, Hassan, your question.
Later in this reading, I believe, is this the writer who talks about how God shows himself little by little to draw us closer? And no?
That's Levinas.
What? Yeah, that's Levinas, right? But later in this reading, Kierkegaard brings up a very similar idea that Levinas brings, that God's love has to be little by little. Let me just bring the page up so I want just in case I'm getting this wrong, but it was 237 when it says in the possibility the eternal rightly understood continually lays out only a small piece at a time, and so on and so forth. Is this 37 first paragraph, line 6?
Oh, in this way, the eternal lures and draws a person in the possibility.
Does this have to do with the partiality of it, that giving someone the hope of something more little by little draws them, keeps the love alive?
Yes, absolutely. And you can interpret it in the way you did, like God luring us, right? Absolutely. So there are two levels in this text, right? There's the God, but there's also just the human part, right? So absolutely, yes. And this is I'm not surprised that he sounds like Levinas, because Levinas was heavily influenced by Kierkegaard, right? So yeah, I think you're on the right track. That you can say, yeah, you can absolutely say that. Very good. Okay, so to summarize, right, everything that you guys said, right, to hope is really about the other person, and it's about seeing within them all the possibilities of the good, right, that exist there. So there's a couple hands. Grady, you have another hand?
Yeah, when Hassan was speaking, he said something about understanding when he's talking about what God was saying about little by little. I also feel like you can't hope for someone unless you fully understand their issues and what they're going through and what's wrong. Because you can't really have hope for someone that you don't fully get everything that they're going through and what's wrong and whatever you're trying to fix. If you don't understand the prefix of it, of what happened before and what led to it, then I don't think you can truly genuinely hope for someone.
Very good. Yes, to hope is to also see why the person is acting that way, right? Very often we just see the behavior. We don't see the pain behind the behavior. We don't see what is causing this behavior. To hope is really to see very clearly beyond what is obvious into what is not so obvious, and it's a vision of love, right? So absolutely, Grady, it's a question of seeing beyond, understanding what is causing this behavior, where is the pain of that person, what is their process, and it implies obviously patience, right? To hope means we have another text in the same section, right, about love being patient, right? This is connected, absolutely. Last comment by Evans. Go ahead, Evans. I haven't heard you yet.
I feel like a lot of people, though, even if you know exactly what's like wrong or where they could end up or who they could be, a lot of times they like don't always want to hear it, or they don't want to get to that point. And like I feel like some people just spend their whole lives never really reaching that potential.
Yeah. And so we have to look, right? We have to realize hope is not about telling the person, right, this is what you should do, right? Hope is a vision. You don't say anything. You don't need to say anything, right? You see it and you cultivate this vision, you nurture this vision. You encourage the person. Is right. Hope is not critical, right? Saying, "Man, you could do so much better. I'm so unhappy with you." Right. Hope is a way of cultivating, and so of course now what you're bringing up, Evans, is the thing. Well, what's the point of hope if the person never changes, right? So let's go to the second part, where I talk about hope as a transformative force. Let's look at this, because what we're going to find out is that hope is much more than just wishful thinking. It's more than just this fantasy you have in yourself. Hope actually has power, right? Hope has an impact. It has an impact not only on the person, but on yourself. We're going to see this, right? It has an impact clearly on the person. We're going to talk about this, but it has also a transformative impact on yourself in the sense that it is in a way connecting you. We're going to talk about this. So let's go there right now. There are two ways I'm going to talk about this. When I talk about hope as a transformational force, number one, I'm going to talk about the psychological aspect of it. And then number two, I'm going to talk about the metaphysical aspect of it. Okay. So these are the two ways I'm going to talk about hope as a force, right? So make sure you write this down, right? Hope for Kierkegaard is not just a feeling. It's not just a wishful delusion. It's not just a fantasy, right? It has power. It has transformative power. It's a force. It has an effect. So we have to see how that works, right? So first of all, the psychological. We've talked about this already. Let me give you just a simple example, right? Let's imagine a kid let's imagine your elementary school teacher. God forbid, it's the worst job in the world, especially when you get to 8th grade. So let's imagine you have a kid in your class. He's a dummy. He's a complete dummy. He sucks at everything. He can't do anything. In fact, he knows he's a dummy. Everybody tells him he's a dummy, his parents, his friends, and now you're the teacher. What strategy could you adopt in order to help this young child or young adult? What should you do? What could you do that could change the person's destiny?
I actually see why he's so dumb.
Why are you so stupid? Is that gonna work? Okay, Evans, elaborate, Evans.
Like, I feel like at least with like education, if when you believe in a kid, even if they're dumb and whatever, they sometimes then try to find out either why, like was said, or they're able to like start working harder and they're able to realize maybe I'm not so dumb. And then, I don't know, sometimes you can get to the bottom of it and they can actually believe in themselves and be able to like be a better person and realize that they have a potential.
Excellent, right? That's what Raman is saying, and Zimmerman, find his strength. In other words, you can use the strategy of telling the kid, I think you're really smart. I think you're smarter than you think, right? I think you can do this. You got this. Come on, let's go. Let's do it. I'll explain it to you, but you're so smart, you're going to get... And you repeat this over and over again, and you will notice, inevitably, this has been proven. There are scientific experiments about this. There's a really recent one, actually, that I'm forgetting right now, but it's exactly this, right? Making the dummy of the class believe they're the smartest, and they actually became the smartest. This is something that has been done. So you can see how hope, which is a vision, I see it, I say it, I encourage it, I see the good, I say the good, I encourage the good in you, right? Actually can have an impact. Right? You are actually nurturing the good in that person. You're feeding the good in that person. You're cultivating the good in that person, and it is growing, right? And so that's the first thing, right? That we see how hope can have a transformative effect. And it's the same in a relationship, right? If instead of constantly criticizing your partner, thereby feeding the bad in them, nourishing the bad in them, you would praise them and focus and highlight the good, or even the good you think could eventually happen, watch what happens. right? This is a challenge that Kierkegaard is giving us, right? And some of you are saying, right, sort of like speaking it into existence. Yes, the power of our words, mind over matter, this is all part of this, right? So you can see how already on the psychological level, right, hope is not just a fantasy. It can have an effect if it's real hope, right? If it's really hope about the other person seeing the good in them. But there is also a metaphysical dimension, which is where Kierkegaard is going to bring us now. So remember I told you, remember we talked about the source, right? The inner source that we all have of love, that we sometimes cannot connect to, but that we should connect to so that we can have more to give. What Kierkegaard is saying is when you begin this work of love, which is hope, when you begin to discipline yourself to hope, what is actually happening within you is an expansion of your capacity to love. You are connecting to this deeper part of yourself. This is what is happening within you. Let me say it again, right? As you discipline yourself to hope, as you tell yourself, I'm going to discipline myself, focus on the good, speak the good, believe the good in that other person. As you're doing that, something within you is actually shifting. Your heart, which was very narrow and thinking only of you and thinking only of despairing and how miserable you were, as you begin this work, you are actually, something in you is opening. Something in you is expanding. This is something very deep, which is happening within yourself. What is actually happening, says Kierkegaard, is you are beginning to connect to that deeper capacity to love that exists within you. You are connecting to this place of love, which is there, but which you haven't connected to as long as you're thinking only of yourself. As long as you're thinking only of yourself, or as long as everything's going well, you're not connected. You're not expanding. You're just you there, happy, or unhappy, right? But as soon as you begin to take that step of hope, which is a powerful step, you are yourself. Not only is the other shifting, but you are shifting. You are expanding your own capacity to love. Something in you is opening. Something in you is broadening. Something in you is becoming, in other words, your capacity to love is expanding. As you are just doing this, you are expanding that capacity to love. This is what Kierkegaard means when he says, at that moment, the temporal is connecting to the eternal. This is an expression he uses. Let me write it down, right? The temporal is connecting to the eternal, by which he means you, right? The part of you that is in the world struggling, right? Is connecting to the eternal part of you, which is actually this inner source, right, of love, right? The eternal, let's be very clear, for Kierkegaard, the eternal is not some afterlife. It's not even God, up there in heaven. It's not life after death. The eternal you carry within yourself. The eternal is this source of love, which is eternal. That's why he calls it eternal, right? Very nicely put, Bella, right? Forever contained in the now, right? The eternal is in the now for Kierkegaard. It's not something after, it's now. It's what he means by eternal is this infinite capacity to love that we have, all of us. That's the eternal. It's this source of love. It's this region of love. It's this capacity to love that we have, which is infinite. He says, as you hope, you are actually transforming within, you are broadening your capacity to love. And as such, you are now connecting to a very deep part of yourself, which is extremely resourceful. As you're connecting to this deeper source of love, you are receiving a lot more than you had before. You're receiving capacity to love, capacity to be compassionate. You're receiving strength. You're receiving new life, right? So that's what he's saying, is that we all have deep within ourselves a very deep capacity for love, but we never tap into it. Because most of the time, either we choose not to or we don't need to, right? People who have great relationships, you don't need to tap into that. It's coming to you, right? Or people who have horrible relationships and they just, kind of stay on the level of despair. Both of these type of people will never tap deeper. But when you choose to hope, in the spite of the despair, you have to go deeper to be able to do that. You begin to access this deeper part of yourself. You begin to access a capacity for love that you didn't have before, that you never knew you had. Let me write this down, right? When you hope, you begin to access a capacity for love you didn't know you had. Right? It's you are expanding, something in you is opening. And that's what Kierkegaard means by accessing the eternal, right? Let's look at that quote really quick. It's on page 233. If you look at the third paragraph where it begins to hope all things, who is there? Put your hand in the screen. Okay, so now you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, and you have the quote, hoping is composed of the eternal and the temporal. In other words, hoping is bridge, which connects the temporal you, this is you in time, in the situation, in the drought, in the difficult situation. This temporal you is capable of connecting to a deeper you, which is the eternal you, which is the loving you, which is the hidden source of love you, right? That's what's going on. And so that's why he says something powerful is taking place, not only outside when you hope in the person, but within yourself. You are accessing a deeper capacity for love. You are expanding your heart. You're basically becoming a more loving person, right, than you ever were before. This is forcing you, if you choose to hope, right? You are going to go to the next level, right, of being a loving person. So any questions on or objections on anything I said? Anyone feel uncomfortable with any of this? Or anyone have a counter argument before we go to the last section about shame? Okay, Halmurad, go ahead. Halmurad? Speak to us.
Yeah. Would I be correct in saying that to hope is to care for another person, to care for their well-being, to care that they grow, that they blossom, to care that they become better? Is that concept similar?
So it's that, but it's what makes it powerful is that you are caring for them when there is nothing left to care for. So hope intervenes when the person is a terrible disaster, right? So otherwise there's no hope. There's just obvious, right? Yeah, you're a nice person. I care for you because you're such a nice person. Hope comes when the person is not nice anymore. Hope comes when there is despair in the air, right? Only then, when you start to despair of the person, is it now a work of love, and are we now talking about hope, right? Because you're not hoping when the person is fine. You're just happy. It's going well, right? You care for them. But hoping is caring for them when you hate their guts, right? When you don't want to care for them, when you want to leave. At that moment, he says, now you're kicking into the process of hope, and now you have to tap deeper in yourself. So it's easy to love someone when they're going well. It's easy to care for them when they care for you, right? But hope happens usually, it's a deeper way of loving, which intervenes when everything is hopeless, when you start to despair, when you want to leave. That's when the work of hope, you can begin that work, right? And that's when you will begin to have to tap deeper into yourself. Does that make sense, Halmurad?
Yeah, as if it was the last stop on the train, yeah.
There's no hope unless you first went through despair, right? If you're not yet despairing, you're not going to reach the level of hope. Hope comes after despair, right? So you first have to despair of the person and be like, I'm done, I can't, I'm exhausted. And then if you nevertheless, in the middle of your despair, choose to hang on and look at the good and pursue the good, even though you don't see it, you don't feel it, but you pursue it, at that moment, that's called hope. That's called hope. And at that moment, you're reaching deep within yourself. You have to. And you're accessing the source. You're accessing the eternal within yourself, inevitably. Make sense?
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
great. Any other clarifications or objections or comments or uncomfortableness with what I've been saying? Okay, so now we get to the last part, which is love is never put to shame. So this is very strange because let's imagine, okay, suppose you've hoped, right? And you've poured your heart into this relationship. You've hoped for them to be better for them. You've hoped for the relationship. And like Evan said at the beginning of class, they never change. In fact, they break up with you. In fact, first of all, they cheat. And then they go with that person. And now here you are. How do you feel? Anybody tell me how you feel? How you feel? You poured your heart in the relationship. Thank you, Leon. You feel betrayed. You feel heartbroken and you feel taken advantage of. You feel like somebody took something from you, right? Kierkegaard says, if you feel like that, you never truly loved. Uh-oh. What does he mean, right? What does it mean that for Kierkegaard, even they cheat on you and they go off with that, we won't name them, with that person, right? Even they betray you, you are not left with nothing. You are not, like he says, put to shame. You are not, in a way, you have not lost anything. You have not lost anything. What does this mean? Grady, help us.
I think this means that he's saying that you're looking at it in the I want to say material. Well, yeah, material and the negative emotion way of looking at it, instead of looking at the fact that you got to experience love. The fact that you got to experience love is to him greater than anything that person could have taken or done to you, because it's a feeling that can't really just be replicated and done over.
Very good. You got it, Grady, right? You might have lost your beloved, right? But you found love, right? Just the fact that you reach this level of love in yourself, just the fact that you are able to love at that capacity is a hidden treasure that you have uncovered in yourself. You never knew you could love like that, right? You have reached a capacity for love that you didn't have before. That person forced you to reach a capacity for love you never thought you would ever have. And so even though you lost the beloved, you found love, right? You found the lover within. And at that moment, you are so infinitely rich that even though they left, you are left with everything. You have lost nothing, right? You have found this treasure within yourself. Am I making sense? This is a little difficult to understand. How many of you, put your hand on the screen if I'm making sense. Okay, that's the idea. Okay, so let me say it again. Let me write it in the chat, right? You lost the beloved, right? Yes. And you lost, a bunch of other things, all the advantages that your beloved gave you, you lost, but you found love, right? And you found love within yourself. In other words, you accessed a part of yourself, right? That is infinitely rich, wealthy, I can't write, wealthy, full, complete, right? You accessed the hidden source, right? And at that moment, you have accessed the very source of love. Why are you still crying over this person? Right? When you have accessed the very source of love. And by the way, the way to continue to access it after a breakup, because after a breakup, we're tempted again to despair and be like, yeah, that person, they did this to me, right? Kierkegaard would say you continue the work of love, which is to hope for the best for them. And in doing so, you keep that connection. You continue to stay connected to this deep source. And so, yeah, you lost a person, but you have emerged from this situation richer than before. That's the idea, right? Even though you lost them, right? Let me write this down, right? You emerge from this whole relationship, right? Richer, larger than before, right? You have now a deeper capacity for love than before. You're a better lover. right? And that's in itself. And when you have that, you have everything, right? When you have access to that deeper source, when you have become this type of lover, the tree which bears fruit in every season, you have everything. You don't need, right? Nothing has been taken away from you. Rather, things have been added to you, right? You have become broader rather than narrower. That's the idea here when he says love is never put to shame, right? Okay, very powerful text, right? Difficult to wrap our heads around, very countercultural, right? We are not taught to hope. We are taught to think of number one, right? And we are taught to despair of each other, right? And we are here entering a very different level of loving, that this is not something that your therapist will tell you about. This is not something your friends will tell you about, right? This is not something that Hollywood will tell you about. So this is really very countercultural approach, right, to love. Okay, any questions? I'm done with what I had to say. So the floor is open for any questions. If you don't have questions, we will conclude. All right, we shall conclude. All right, so good. So next time I'm going to introduce Buber. So you have some time to catch up, right? There's no reading assignment for Wednesday. So you do have time to catch up a little bit. If you didn't watch the videos, you can watch those, and then we will begin Buber and we will be all caught up. All right, so you guys can go. Whoever wants to stay and ask a few more questions, you can, and the rest of you can go. I'll stop the recording.